New video of Rick Harrison's home changes everything. The bizarre truth behind the storage locker discovery. An explosive 3,000-plus word article that unpacks the surreal, shocking allegations. The auction that wasn't supposed to happen. At first, it was just another abandoned storage unit, one of the thousands scattered across Las Vegas. A missed payment here, a few late notices there, and before long, it was up for auction. Standard practice. A couple of curious bidders circled around the rust-streaked metal door, hopeful for a hidden treasure, maybe even some antique poker chips or vintage vinyl. But nothing, not even the most vivid imagination, could have prepared them for what they actually found. Inside, beneath a dusty tarp and behind several collapsed cardboard boxes marked with the iconic Pawn Stars logo, were crates. Not antiques. Not silverware. Crates. And inside them? Human remains. Not just any remains, but shockingly well-preserved bodies that bore eerie resemblances to celebrities who had died under unusual or mysterious circumstances. And every crate had something else just as disturbing. Rick Harrison's initials. That's when the police got involved. And everything changed. Wait, Rick Harrison? As in Pawn Stars Rick? Let's back up for a second. Rick Harrison is no stranger to fame. The no-nonsense star of Pawn Stars built a television empire from his family-run pawn shop in Las Vegas. He's been seen as a savvy businessman, a history buff, and someone with a curious eye for the rare, the valuable, and the downright weird. But this wasn't coins or Civil War memorabilia. This was something far darker. The unit was soon tied to Rick through payment history and digital records. A trail of email correspondence showed the locker had been discreetly rented under an alias, but all roads led back to Rick's home address. Within hours, the FBI descended on his property like a scene out of a crime thriller. And it only got weirder from there. FBI raid uncovers a private collection. The raid on Rick Harrison's mansion wasn't quiet. Neighbors reported black SUVs rolling in at dawn, heavily armed agents swarming the perimeter, and a loud crash, possibly the front door being breached. Inside, agents discovered what can only be described as a private museum of the morbid. Behind a false wall in Rick's basement was a climate-controlled room. Inside, more crates, more remains, medical-grade preservation tanks, and in one corner, an old wooden cabinet filled with items that were eerily personal. Sunglasses that looked like they belonged to Princess Diana, a glove that could have come from Michael Jackson, even what appeared to be a signed letter from Kurt Cobain, dated a week after his official death. Were they real? Forensics are still catching up. But the implications are chilling. Was Rick just obsessed with death? Or was he part of something much larger? Celebrity corpses as collectibles? We've all seen the extremes of collector culture, cars, stamps, sneakers. But this? What if, instead of memorabilia, someone was collecting the people themselves? Experts who reviewed early photos from the storage unit say the remains were so well preserved they initially thought they were hyperrealistic wax figures. But DNA tests have confirmed otherwise. These are human remains. Among the victims identified so far, a man who looks almost identical to actor River Phoenix. Another who bears an uncanny resemblance to Brittany Murphy. Even a woman whose facial structure and dental records appear to match a backup singer for Michael Jackson, who vanished without explanation in the 2000s. Is it possible these people faked their deaths? Or worse, were they lured and preserved deliberately? The underground world of living history collections. As the investigation broadens, one theory is emerging that sounds straight out of a horror movie. The existence of secret societies or ultra-wealthy collectors who don't just want items tied to the past, but want to own the past itself. Sources close to the investigation claim that Rick may have been part of, or perhaps manipulated by, an underground ring of elite collectors. A world where historical authenticity is prized so highly that morality becomes a blurry afterthought. This isn't about preserving history anymore. It's about possessing it. But why Rick? Here's the thing, Rick Harrison has always had a deep fascination with the past. If you watched even a few episodes of Pawn Stars, you'd know, he thrives on the idea of connection, of touching a piece of history. So maybe it started small. An innocent acquisition. A preserved lock of hair. An unclaimed body from a morgue auctioned for science. And then, obsession. An anonymous whistleblower who claims to have worked for Rick's private security detail came forward, stating, he talked about wanting to create a gallery of stories that couldn't be told on television. He wanted history not in books, not in objects, but in people. Suddenly, Rick's casual, dry-humored remarks about one-of-a-kind items feel much darker in hindsight. A town holding its breath. Las Vegas, once amused by the fame Pawn Stars brought, now sits in stunned silence. The gold and silver pawn shop has been closed since the FBI raid. Tourists stand outside, taking selfies with a "sorry, we're closed" sign like it's part of the attraction. Employees have either gone radio silent or lawyered up. Meanwhile, fans online are in an uproar. Was the show a cover-up all along? Were those lighthearted segments hiding something sinister just out of frame? And most terrifying of all, how many bodies are still unaccounted for? What can we learn from this? Okay, deep breath. Let's step back from the horror and think. How did something this disturbing fly under the radar for so long? And what does it say about our culture of obsession? Our hunger for ownership? For preserving what should have been left to rest? In a world where fame is currency and memory is marketable, perhaps it was inevitable someone would try to own both. But the lesson here is bigger. Curiosity without conscience is a dangerous thing. How you can spot the warning signs. So, how do you know when collecting crosses the line? How do you prevent yourself from being swept up in the next viral auction or falling prey to fake, historical sellers online? Here are a few things to watch for. Always verify provenance. If a seller can't prove where an item came from, that's a red flag. Be skeptical of extreme rarity. Just because something is one of a kind doesn't mean it should be for sale. Watch for the morbid angle. If a collection begins focusing on death, disappearance, or tragedy, ask why. Don't buy into cult personalities. No matter how charming or funny someone is on screen, fame doesn't equal integrity. What happens next? As of now, Rick Harrison is reportedly under house arrest pending trial. The FBI has remained tight-lipped about the number of victims, citing an ongoing investigation. Several conspiracy theorists have spun off wild claims, some even suggesting Rick was framed by competitors or secret Hollywood cabals. But most people? They're just shocked. Shocked that someone so familiar, so seemingly harmless, could be at the center of something this grotesque. Shocked that a show built on trust, negotiation, and transparency might have hidden a world of secrets behind its velvet ropes. Final thoughts. Truth is stranger than anything on TV. At the end of the day, we all want a good story. And for years, Pawn Stars gave us just that, a glimpse into the past, sprinkled with humor, wit, and family drama. But now we're asking questions that can't be pawned off with a shrug and a price tag. The next time someone tells you they're just a collector, maybe pause. Ask what they're collecting, and more importantly, why. Because history should be remembered, not trapped. The internet erupts. Memes, theories, and digital detectives. It didn't take long for the internet to do what it does best: explode. Within minutes of the news breaking, Twitter, or X, depending on your era, was ablaze. Hashtags like #RickHorrorHouse, #PawnSouls, and #StorageUnitOfDoom started trending globally. TikTok sleuths began combing through Pawn Stars episodes, looking for signs they had missed. That one moment Rick looked nervous? Suspicious. That time Chumlee joked about dead presidents in the back? Suddenly not so funny. And Reddit? Let's just say the theories were wilder than a yard sale at Area 51. Some believe Rick stumbled on a secret government cloning facility and decided to go rogue. Others think this is all a long con for a new Netflix docuseries, Pawned, The Dark Vault of Rick Harrison. But here's the thing, not all theories are without merit. Some users actually cross-referenced missing persons reports with those who supposedly matched the bodies found. And what they uncovered made chills run deeper. Missing entertainers, dancers, and minor public figures from the last 2 decades, all of whom were reported as having vanished from Las Vegas, LA, or nearby states. Could this be more than just a macabre collection? Could Rick have been a middleman in a far-reaching trafficking ring cloaked in Hollywood glitz? The FBI won't confirm. But silence, as always, only fuels speculation. A family torn apart? What about Rick's family? His son, Corey Harrison, longtime cast member and co-star, hasn't made a public statement. But sources close to the family say he's been devastated, blindsided, and deeply conflicted. He worshipped his dad, a former production assistant shared anonymously. He always said, "My dad built this empire with brains and grit. He's a genius." Now, that empire is crumbling. There are rumors that Corey had begun distancing himself from the business months prior to the FBI raid, changing passwords, moving funds, even purchasing a separate residence. Some speculate he knew something wasn't right. Others think he's hiding his own secrets. Could the show's charm have masked a generational cover-up? Time will tell. But the silence from Rick's closest allies is growing louder by the day. The hidden meaning behind the show's slogans. Here's a fun but creepy thought. Let's look at some of the catchphrases used by Pawn stars over the years. This is the real deal. You never know what's going to walk through that door. Everything has a story. Now read them again. They take on an entirely different tone when you imagine them applied to a secret collection of bodies kept under lock and key. Is it possible that Rick, consciously or not, was broadcasting his true intentions all along? Could the show's framing, digging up the past, uncovering strange relics, have been a metaphor for something much darker? We're not saying Pawn Stars was built on horror. But what if horror was always quietly woven into the backdrop? The psychological profile. What makes a collector go too far? Psychologists and criminologists are now weighing in. It's not uncommon, they say, for collectors to escalate. What begins as harmless hoarding can morph into obsessive behavior. The need to possess becomes a need to control, to conquer, to preserve what time should have erased. The fallout, lawsuits, investigations, and public reckoning. As the dust settles from the raid, the consequences are only beginning to unfold. Several families have already stepped forward, claiming the remains recovered may belong to their long-missing loved ones. Lawsuits are being prepared, not just against Rick Harrison, but against his show's production companies, network executives, and even the storage facility that auctioned the unit. If it turns out anyone knowingly enabled this grotesque collection to continue unchecked, the fallout could spread like wildfire. The FBI, meanwhile, has launched a multi-agency task force. They're now combing through Rick's financial records, communications, and even past show episodes for hidden clues. Every frame is under scrutiny. Every item sold, every private deal made off camera, is being reevaluated through a criminal lens. What did the network know? Did producers or crew ever suspect something wasn't right? And what happens to the hours of unaired footage now reportedly seized by the FBI? Could there be evidence buried in raw tape? Whispers caught in mic checks. Faces blurred out of episodes now being identified? The entertainment industry is holding its breath.